Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Australian College of Physical Education. It's our second Monday night coaches club. My name is Gareth Long, and I'd like to welcome you along, whether you joined us last week or whether it's your first time this week. Thank you very much. Great to have everybody along. Again, I think we've got coaches joining us from all over the world. So some people having their dinner, some people having their breakfast. I think probably if you're in America or Canada, you're probably lying in bed trying not to wake up your other half. So thank you for joining us. Just a reminder, if you have joined us, to make sure your microphone's turned off and your camera is turned off. What it does, it makes the recording a lot better because we get to see the faces of the people talking. So just have a little check for that. Thank you very much. So I'd like to start by introducing my two co-hosts today. Firstly, I'm going to introduce Warren Grieve. Warren was part of our panel last year. Last year, we haven't gone that long. Last week. But back on the bench today, Warren. How are you doing, mate?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
Good stuff. And secondly, I'd like to introduce Drew Taylor. How's it going, Drew?
Hey, I'm very well, thank you, and very much looking forward to this.
Big topic today, isn't it?
Massive. The most important topic in football and sport, in my opinion. Yes,
well, I happen to agree with you. So, and everybody out there, thank you so much for providing feedback from last week. It's really nice to see people's positive comments on social media, and I received a lot of emails with people suggesting ideas and feedback, and that's great. And hopefully we can incorporate some of that feedback in today's. Common suggestion was to have longer in the breakout rooms, so hopefully we'll have longer in there today. And also, in addition to that, we're going to try something at the end where we leave the breakout rooms open at the end as a kind of extra time for people that still want to chat about the things that have been raised. There will be a recording of last week's that will be available soon. Apology, we'll hopefully get quicker at getting those out, but we had a bit of a technical hitch, but we found the recording and it's been edited, and hopefully that will be with people soon. Okay, I think that's all the admin. So we'll introduce the topic today. As Drew said, it's one of the most important, and it's broadly based around participation in football. For those who registered early enough, you were sent some pre-reading, and I think there were some really interesting things that came out of those. I don't want to delve into that too much because we've got some experts on the panel that will do that for us. So today we're looking at how we can keep players playing the game. And I'm going to introduce our panel. Firstly, I'm going to introduce Robin Russell. Robin is a highly experienced coach developer, coach educator. During his time at the FA, he was highly influential in developing the academy system alongside Howard Wilkinson, and also establishing the FA Coaches Association and the version of the game Mini Soccer. Now working as a football development consultant for UEFA and for the Asian Football Confederation. I would also like to thank Robin for being flexible and changing the time. He's got a meeting with UEFA in about an hour's time. So rather than cancel, he was great to be flexible and change his time. And also I reached out to Robin about a month ago for something I'm doing here at the Australian College of Physical Education. And not only giving me time, he then introduced me to 5 other people to speak to. So we're really grateful to have someone of the calibre of Robin on today's panel. How you doing, Robin?
I'm very well. Thank you much for everybody else for amending the time. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. And secondly, we have Jack Walton, Coach Development Manager at the FA. And for me, one of the best coach educators, most innovative coach development practitioners out there at the moment. I first met Jack when I was doing my FA Module 2 and totally opened my eyes to how coach education should be. And then I was fortunate enough to become a colleague of Jack's at the Football Association. Jack was also influential in the FA's new coaching pathway. So I know we're going to get a lot of insight from Jack today. How are you doing, Jack?
Very well, thank you, Gareth. Very humbled after that very kind introduction.
Well deserved, mate. Pleasure to have you on board. And last but not least, we have Chris Adams. Now, anybody who's done a coach education course in the last few years in New South Wales will probably know Chris, because Chris has probably presented on that course. So Chris is, our third experienced coach developer on the panel, and ex-technical director in New South Wales, and of course one of the brains behind the excellent podcast in the technical area. How's it going, Chris?
Very well, Gareth. Very well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Well, that's our panel. Excellent panel. We're maintaining the high standards. The bar is high, but we'll dive in straight away, because I know that these are the people you want to hear from. So, Robin, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. And I'm really interested in some of the trends of football participation. In your experience, what are some of the global patterns that we're seeing in football and participation across the world?
Good morning, everyone. And I hope wherever you are, you're safe and well. And we will be discussing football and sport over the next hour. But obviously, we have to appreciate at this time, there are far, far more important things than football, and keeping safe and healthy is very important. Jack won't remember him, but there was a colleague of mine at the Football Association, a fellow called Mike Appleby, who works in the finance department. Sadly passed away last week through coronavirus. He was an awfully nice chap, and everyone at the FA, I'm sure, who was there would remember him. So it is important. It brings it home that all the exhortations to stay in and do all that, when you do hear of someone who, it does hit home. Anyway, to the point. You will be, I'm sure, a variety of various people who are listening in, coaches, directors of coaching, development officers, etc. I've been fortunate to be involved in a project in the USA for the last 9 months, basically gathering data. It's the first time I've ever seen data where you could track the individual player. Registration data is very good in the USA, because they make sure that every player who wants to play is registered for insurance purposes. So the data analysts were able to track players from year to year. And so the groups that were at most risk of retention appear to be, first of all, surprisingly, the young ones, the 5 to 9-year-olds. And the normal perceived wisdom is that the upward curve of participation is still good at that age, so retention is not a problem. Actually, the upward curve at that age is very good, because growth is still going in. It's a bit like filling the bath. We don't notice that we haven't actually put the plug in the bath, because we've still got the taps on. It's only when we turn the taps off, if you like, when growth starts to recede at 10, 11, 12, that we realise that we're losing water out of the bath. Actually, we're losing water out of the bath, according to the work we've done over there, from as soon as they start. So all I would say to you, in your club, in your association, can you just track the retention of your players from whenever they start? And I think you will find some quite startling statistics of your early learners basically trying soccer for a year and then packing it up. So retention, I would say, starts right at the beginning. Retention, the next aspect is research from the Dutch FA would show that late birthdays under relative age effect, so Q4 birthdays, they're about 15 to 20% more likely to pack up the game than, if you like, early birthdays, Q1 and Q2. So the two most significant groups for retention, the research would show, is the very early ones and all Q4 birthdays. Teenagers obviously is an issue. The biggest issue that we'd see from teenagers is that teenagers don't necessarily stop playing, they stop signing up. So the biggest issue is that the number of new players coming in as teenagers is severely hampered. So if we've been doing a really good job of coaches and coach education over the years, you would think that retention would be highest in the earliest years. I would say that doesn't appear to be the case. Growth seems to be very strong, but the turnover is quite massive. Those are those figures. I would say check it in your own club and see what it is in your own club.
Thank you, Robin. That's really interesting because one of the pre-readings I sent out to the coaches showed growth and then a massive drop off in Australia at sort of 11 and 12. But in two good points there about tracking in our own club and also relative age effect. We're often looking at relative age effect in terms of who's in the sort of talent development system and who's being selected. But I hadn't thought of it in terms of participation as well. So really interesting. Thank you, Robin. And we'll probably delve into some of those things a little bit more later. So Jack, if we've got, unfortunately, people leaving the game, I assume we need to find out why and what players want. And I know you've got some insight in this area. So Jack, what in your opinion, or in your opinion and in your research, what do junior and youth players want from football?
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying something a little bit controversial here, and I don't know. And the reason why I say that, I think these are three words of football and coaching and our messy, complex world can learn from this pandemic. It is having the strength to say those three words. I don't know. We can make best guesses and we can look at what evidence is telling us, but there's very few kind of real truths out there. But what the evidence suggests is that, unsurprisingly, and this won't, it won't be anything new to anyone listening in. I don't think that it's very much driven by intrinsic reasons. So I do it because I enjoy the satisfaction of trying hard. Competition can be an intrinsic driver, which is what my research focused on. Obviously, being with friends, that social bond is really, really strong. So this isn't necessarily anything new, but I'm more interested in not necessarily what people tell us, but what they actually do. So yeah, it very much driven by intrinsics, and I guess that's what we've got to respond to as coaches, and our systems is got to reflect that. And my specific bit of research focused on boys within the city here who are under 15s. So it's difficult to generalize, but you were involved in, I think, when the FA Youth Development Review came out, which was 2012, and that then had an influence on our whole youth grassroots system. And this, I guess, was a follow-up piece of work that is still having suggesting similar results from what was done back then. And that original piece of research was done with, I think, 7 to 12-year-olds.
So your research mainly focused on adolescents, Jack?
Yes, yeah, under 15. So we looked at, or I interviewed a few teams with some small focus groups. So we tried to pick a range of abilities, if you like. So we've got in the city here a large number of leagues and divisions, quite a strong player base in terms of quality. So we looked at teams who played at the kind of top end of the top division, right the way down to the bottom end of the bottom division. Spoke to those groups of boys for roughly an hour and a half in length, and just got to really express themselves in terms of what was important to them about competition. So this kind of was born out of frustration of seeing teams unevenly, or teams who were matched together by leagues who had no real right to be playing on the same pitch as one another, but because the league system said that they had to, they found themselves sharing a pitch on a Saturday morning, and lo and behold, you would end up with a 15-0 score that nobody benefited from. So it was really starting to we gave the boys some interesting tasks and made them have some forced choices. So things like 4 cards. Would you rather have certain win, certain loss, be the uncertain underdog or the uncertain favourite? So rank those in order of what, when you start your game on a Saturday morning, where do you prefer to be? Unsurprisingly, the uncertain cards were the most favourable. Certain win and certain loss were kind of pushed to the bottom straight away. And then what I guess was maybe some surprising to some people listening in, that actually uncertain underdog was very popular. That was the most popular card chosen as number 1. So these boys like to go into the game knowing that they've got a good fighting chance, but it's always nice to kind of punch up, if you like, and beat someone that we weren't expecting to beat. So that was interesting. We did things like easy opponent, hard opponent, or equal opponent. Who would you rather play? Again, rank them in order. The most common thing selected there, that easy opponent, was pushed to the bottom. So these boys don't, although sometimes us adults might have a less stressful Saturday or Sunday morning when our team wins easily, and we can give ourselves a nice pat on the back. What these boys were suggesting anyway is that they actually prefer challenge over winning, and that's a difficult concept to get your head around. That what I take from the game is the challenge and the struggle and striving to win, rather than actually just winning. And if there's one thing that these results suggested that they really disagree with or really dislike, it's being handed something on a plate. Winning easy is really not fun for these people. Excellent,
Jack. Thank you. Fascinating study, and perhaps we'll come back later and think what are the learnings for the coach from that study and your other experiences. Thanks, Jack. Right, well, Jack said he was going to be controversial, so I might as well be controversial, and I'm going to put Chris on the spot now. Chris, you're in charge, mate. If you could change one thing in grassroots football, and my question originally says in Australia, so I'll stick with it, but I'll let you go more global if you want. So if you could change one thing in grassroots football in Australia, what would it be?
I think that's the $1 million question, Gareth.
That's why I'm asking it, and you're the man to answer.
In 2 different ways, because I think when we talk grassroots football, sometimes we just talk kids football, but for me, grassroots football is anyone playing the game down in their local park, be it up to over 45 masters, be it AL 7s with the sort of 35-year-olds through to everyone playing the game. So it isn't just kids football. So for me, the first angle would be for federations, associations, clubs to be brave with the formats that they play. We often get lots of associations here say, look, we aren't going to be able to run a over 35s comp this year because we've only got 4 teams, or we can't run an under 16s girls because there's only 5 teams. Well, that's probably because you're still playing full-size football. You could still offer to that grassroots level. Why not make it 8v8 and spread that out throughout the clubs, or 6v6 or 7v7, so there's still football being played. So for me, I think associations, federations just need to be very flexible in the formats that they offer, and be brave to do that, and actually break the mold a little bit and go, well, because the question is always well, this is how it's always been, and that isn't going to look like football. Well, yes, it's not going to look like the football that's on the telly, but it's does that have to be that? So for me, we need flexible formats for all football, and I think that's been rife here in Australia, and it's been very privatised, and I think the private market's really capitalised on that, and I think we as federations have dropped the ball a little bit there, and it's very hard to get that back from the private world. I know, for example, my wife's a teacher, and every summer she always plays like an 8-week format with some friends from school who don't even play football, but they just want to play just to get their half-hour a week exercise because it's highly flexible. So can we get that all year round rather than just having it for the 8 weeks in the summer? So that's the first side of it. The second one for me, going down to the kids football trials and grading at a young age. I think the first experience that kids get when they turn up to their club is that they're often told that they just aren't good enough, and then that for me is completely wrong. That the first experience that the kids get is that they can't be in this team. You're now in this team, and they've already had a poor experience anyway. One of my friends here in Sydney, his son signed up for the first time this year to go play for his local club because he wanted to play with his friends from school. They went down to the trial process, and then all three of them were split into different teams. And two of them haven't signed up to play properly now because they're not in the same team. So scrapping trials and grading, for me, probably controversial because it's very deep in the culture here in Australia. But for me, we need to get rid of trials and grading in that very young age.
Thanks, Chris. I think you might have done two, but I'm going to let that go because they were two excellent points there. And thank you for reminding us that when we talk about grassroots football, we're not just talking about the junior game. You know, we're one of the best things for me that's come out in grassroots football lately is the push for walking football. So whereby we might get that participation cliff at that certain age, we might get a little kick in the tail at the end when we when we can still play the game that we love. So thank you for that.
Gareth, could I?
Yes.
Yeah, can I just come in? Two things really. Interesting what Jack said about teenagers and challenges. The research we've done in America, and this is about 600,000 players at the moment, and it's not research. The idea is it's for US youth soccer to provide a service back to the States, is that from 11 years of age, both boys and girls, the retention in competitive soccer in the US is very good. The retention rates, once they're signed up in a competitive travel team or a competitive team over there, it is quite good. And there's not much of a drop-off. And I know there's probably an issue that, well, kids are trying to hang in there for get a scholarship or whatever. But the retention rates of once they've opted for competitive football is very good. The other thing I would say, sorry, Chris, if I didn't pick it up, but from my experience, certainly in the early days in the UK, and will be increasingly so after the lockdown, is that the bounce in participation in this country from the 80s onwards was driven really by private entrepreneurs, holiday camps, soccer centres, that sort of thing. And it was the job, I think, very much so of the Federation to create that market, provide accreditation, and not to try and manage everything, but to provide guidelines and accreditation so that the private sector, the football clubs, the football and the community clubs, the professional clubs, etc., could work in that way. So to maximise retention, we've got to encourage the private sector to provide free play, I think, to provide, to avoid what you said about selection early. But I think it's working very much with the private sector, particularly after the lockdown. It'll be the private sector. It'll be the movers and shakers, the entrepreneurs, the hustlers, if you like, and they'll be the ones who will pick up the slack, in my opinion, after the lockdown, because that's what happened before. Sorry, Chris.
No, spot on, Robin. Spot on. I mean, that's where it is that you're right. That's what we haven't done well here in this country, here in Australia, is not to fully manage it, but just to get the accreditation, the systems in place that we're a part of the family, if that makes sense. So they aren't two separate families; it's one whole football family.
Yeah, apologies. I was on mute then. I was having a great conversation with myself. Robin, that's great, because the question I was going to ask you was about, I know you've been considering football's, post-COVID strategy and how football could actually respond now it's had time to think about, what it does when we come out of here and how it maybe improves player retention. I wonder if it was worth you sharing any more thoughts that you've got on that, but particularly your 4Rs target groups that I know you've given some thought to, because players are sort of split into different groups in your method?
Yeah. I think it'll be reset time, just like in our computer or our e-games or whatever. You press reset, so it'll be reset. I think there's 4 groups. There's the number 1 group, the restart group. They were playing regularly before, and they're committed players. Clubs and associations will find not a lot of trouble in getting them back. The next group, group 2, is the return. They'd stopped playing regularly before the lockdown. So they could have been the groups I was talking about before. Now, they're not going to restart. You've got to get them to return. The third group would be the renew ones. They played previously and occasionally, maybe informally, but not as registered players. So we've got to renew those. And the last group is the reach group. They've never played soccer before. So I think there are 4 groups: restart, return, renew, and reach. And I think the challenge will be to get the return, the renew, and the reach back. And as Jack was alluding to, these particular groups, those that have never played before or only played very occasionally, they're not going to be signing up for 30 games a year and training twice a year. They'll be signing up to some very loosely committed, free play opportunities to come play. If you look at America at the moment, and probably I think you've got the same in 1 or 2 cases in Australia, there's a great movement in America called flag football. It's basically touch rugby with little bands around their waist. It's incredibly popular, about 1.5 million playing. It's co-educational, it's recreational, it's safe. It's very good for aerobic exercise. It's very, very low commitment, and it's very low cost. And operating on a Friday night where parents can take them on a Friday night, the parents are not locked into the whole weekend of driving kids places, and it is incredibly popular. I know lots of kids will pay that and will play other games as well. So I think the trick will be not just the restarting the ones that are already regularly playing, but tracking, finding out if you're an association or a club, can you look at your data and data, everything, a lot of this will be data driven, looking at your players that you had registered 3 or 4 years ago. Can you reach out to them? Can you reach out to the friends they've got, to the brothers and sisters they've got, etc., etc.?
Yeah, no, I think breaking it down to those 4 sections is really useful for clubs, to then develop specific strategies for your club. So no, that's really useful. And it reminds, some of the things you were saying then reminded me of one of the documents we sent out about the Australian golden generation. And it seemed to me there were 3 things that were really important to their early participation and being good at it. It was the importance of their local club. There was a sense of community there. They stuck with their local club rather than switching, to different clubs every season. The importance of free play and unstructured football, which you mentioned, and also the early sampling, playing different sports, not feeling that you could only play one sport at a young age. And they seem to be some messages that maybe we need to get back to. But I'll be interested to see what the coaches listening think. Jack, I remember a slide that you used on the youth module 2, and it stuck with me. It was, don't be a child's last coach, or don't be a child's final coach. It's always stuck with me there. And of course, nobody here today wants to be responsible for a player giving up the game, particularly young people, I would say. So for people listening today, what are the key things that coaches can do, and what can coaches influence? Because they can't influence everything. But what can a coach influence? What can they do to help players stay in the game?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, Gareth, because I was actually, that slide deck was, it wasn't an official FA one. It was something that I put together, just quotes and things like that. And I used to put that on at just break times, I think, just to, I guess, well, see if it had any impact. And it clearly did. And I was just thinking of one of them yesterday. One of the slides on it said, in times of change, which I think this is a time of change that none of us have ever experienced before. the learners will inherit the earth, while the knowers will be wonderfully prepared for a world that no longer exists. And I was only thinking about that yesterday, and I thought, oh, that was on that slide deck, and you just reminded me of that. I think the wording of the question's interesting, Gareth, and especially at the moment, I've been reflecting a lot on things that, I guess there's three spheres. So there's things that you can't control, there's things that you can control, and there's things that sit in between which you can influence. I think probably I would start with what a coach can control. So there's only two things that a coach can control, and that's the practices that the players do. That's the stuff that we plan out, and our own behaviors. What comes out of our mouth, and how we say and what we do. So try and get those aligned with what it is that your players respond well to, and why they're there. And that only really comes from having a connection with the players. So I'm a big fan of a Canadian researcher called Jean Cote. I recommend people do a deep dive into him. If you jump on Google Scholar and pop his name in there, you can find loads of it. He's probably one of the most published authors in the whole world when it comes to sports coaching. But I really like his definition of sports coaching, which I hope I'll do it justice. But it's kind of, I'll put it in layman's terms, using a number of different knowledge sources to improve the players' competence, their confidence, connection, and character. But I think that of those four, if you can focus more on the connection. So if we're thinking about, so the question was to help players stay in the game. And I've experienced this myself with the boys that I coach. So they're now, we've just had our season at under 16s finished. We've got a squad of 18. Russell was talking about retention. Now we're by no means world beaters. So of the 18, 14 are Q3 and 4 birthdays. So we're real late developers, and we really are swimming in a sea of sharks. Around here, there's, like I said, there's a lot of good teams, a lot of good players. And I think in my 20 plus years of coaching, this time last year was the proudest moment, data-driven moment of my coaching life. And that was all 18 players from last season at U15 signed up again for U16. And we only won 2 games all season. We had a goal difference of maybe minus 100. But I don't proclaim to be a wonderful coach. I don't actually think I'm a very good technical coach. But what I think, when I put my finger on it and speaking to the boys, is we have good connection. And I think that they feel that I try to understand them as people first, and then as players. So they're the things that you can control. But then you talked about influence. So one of the things that I've kind of done over my grassroots coaching journey over the last sort of 6 or 7 years was when we moved to 11-a-side, I was getting frustrated with the way things were done. So I actually I applied to come on the local league committee. So I've got myself on the committee, and then what we've done is we've formed a really strong youth committee who are really open-minded, and we've made a few kind of systematic changes over the last 12 months. So one of the things that we've done is we recognise that one of the most unenjoyable things for a young player is a cricket score. And the research that I've done would suggest that is as unenjoyable for the losers as it is for the winners. So leagues tend to group teams in September, and then you're locked into that division for the rest of the season. Well, that can be quite a miserable experience if you find yourself in the wrong division. So we influenced, if you like, the league to change their structure so that the league was broken down into 3 mini seasons. So what we would do is everyone would play each other once, and then we would review all those divisions, and we would promote and relegate with the intention of trying to get more closely balanced teams playing each other more often throughout the season. Now we're only one prematurely ended season in, but already we're in a good place.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to ask
to get off.
Yeah, it sounds like we got somebody who shouldn't be on here, and hopefully if Drew and Warren are able to identify.
Is that a Zoom bomb?
I think that might be our first Zoom bomb. I suppose. I suppose we.
I thought it was one of you guys.
No, we wouldn't be so rude to you, Jack, at all. No, Jack, that's a brilliant answer. Really, really honest as well, and it brings up, what do we judge our value as a coach, and often we judge it on results, and if we can start to look at other things like connection and players staying in the game, I think we can justify and articulate what we're doing really well. So that's excellent. Thank you, Chris. So if coaches are really important, that makes coach development really important. What do you think coach development, the aim of coach development is in supporting coaches at grassroots level?
I think, one, it has to provide the support that they actually really need. And I think for that, we need to actually find that out and do some real sort of research into what the grassroots coaches want, and around actually do more listening when we design any course, during the assuming. So again, sort of putting it into the context here in Australia, we've obviously got the grassroots course, which is a 3-hour course that the coaches do, which for me is a good introduction into it. But I think we need to, it's often ran before the season has started, before those grassroots coaches have had any experience of actually being a grassroots coach. So they're kind of going into the course blind as well. So I think we should potentially look at pushing it back so they've actually had an experience with the kids in front of them, so they come onto the course and then they can actually share the stories and share the challenges that they have faced. I know that NRL have done that a lot here, that they've actually set their calendar for their introductory grassroots course to be at the clubs after about 4 weeks, where the coaches have had an experience being the coach with the kids, and they've experienced, and then they actually saw an increase in the amount of coaches that went onto it, because I think some grassroots coaches might not want to go onto the course because they feel as if they can do it, or the experiences that they've got as a player, whereas once they've had the kids in front of them or the players in front of them, they realise, look, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. I do need a little bit of help. So for me, pushing the grassroots courses back so they've had an experience first. One, so that they can reflect on those experiences, but actually share maybe how they overcame those challenges. So it's not always the instructor doing the talking, it's actually coming from grassroots coaches, helping other grassroots coaches. And for me, I think we need to get the real grassroots coach development to be happening inside the club. Coaches there, they often don't identify as a coach. We use the term that they are just a football helper. The lifespan is 1 year, 2 years, 3 years if you're really lucky. Often the last dad or mum to stand back. So they might not want to go onto a course, or they don't even know who the governing body are. But so their interactions are with someone at their club. So if we can get people inside the club who are able to deliver the grassroots courses, then we may see more people going towards them, because the affinities with the club, it isn't with the federations or the associations. So for me, it's that. And then looking at it at the grassroots level around, I think for me, it's not what you coach, it's how you coach it. And I think we look a little bit too much on our courses here on the X's and O's, not on the stuff that Jack spoke about there around the connection and the communications with the kids. So I think that's a real area. And I saw a question in there from Rocky around that, is that we need to incorporate that more into our courses. And I completely agree, is that at that grassroots level, we're too focused on the X's and O's, not on the how we coach it. So for me, it has to be club-based with someone from the club, so there's a connection to actually go and support as well. But the final one for me is that we need to stop looking at coach development as just people in a tracksuit from the FFA or from the association. Anyone can be a coach developer. It could be someone that is on the training pitch to the left of you that's coached the under 8s for 2 years, and you're the under 6s coach, and they might just pass on some hints and tips. So I think we need to break down that coach development isn't just a formal process of someone in a governing body tracksuit. It's another coach at your club who's going to pass on some hints and tips and ideas and challenges that they've faced and share stories.
Thanks, Chris. It's interesting because we talked a lot about being flexible and changing how we perceive the game of football, and you started speaking there about being flexible and changing the way we see coach development. So it ties in really nicely. Before we're going to go into breakout rooms in a minute, and again, apologies for those Zoom bombs. I don't know how we stop that happening, but I will sort it out for next week. That won't happen again. I wouldn't mind actually if Warren's able, maybe Warren, I'd like you maybe to just bring out some points that have really resonated with you, and then Drew, if maybe you could give us some themes of questions that are coming up in the chat that we could explore in the second half.
Yeah, just there's things that sort of resonate with me, and looking at the chat's been absolutely fantastic down the side. I know you guys are concentrating obviously on what you're saying, but I think the link between grassroots and social football all the way up to the performance level, but there being something for everybody, and that's what's coming through certainly on the chat here. So just having the love for that game and being in an environment that supports that and continues to grow that love for the game. There's a great question on there from Nathan Walker, and he wonders,
Nathan. Yeah, this will be a good question. Yeah,
and he wonders whether it's worth discussing the relationship and the communication between schools and grassroots providers. PE and sport should play a large role in player retention at the ages mentioned, and that's got a nice little thread going there. So just the thoughts from the other guys that are on the panel just around that as well.
Yeah, maybe we'll come back to that second half. But yes, I think Nathan's right. If children have a great experience in physical education at an early age, and whether that's involving football or other sports, then perhaps we're more likely to get that retention. So maybe we'll come back to that in the second half if we get a chance. How about you, Drew? Any cracking questions that we can consider for the second half?
Yeah, there's been a couple there. Rocky, and then also a couple of others have put it in there around. Should coaching courses maybe focus more on pedagogy and how you coach or how you deliver an environment that will engage and continue to keep people engaged? To sort of paraphrase a few of them into one.
Thanks, Drew. And I think probably Jack and Robin will be able to come back with some stuff in the way that perhaps coach education changed a little bit in the UK and maybe other countries. Robin will have his eyes across other good practice that's happening across UEFA and the Asian Football Confederation. So if we can get back before Robin leaves us, we might be able to get some examples from there as well. Okay, right. We're going to go into our half-time chat. I am just going to hopefully move on the screen one more. Drew, does that work? Can we see as a slight change? Thanks, mate. Okay. So this was we tried this last week, and I was really pleased with the feedback that the coaches seem to value the opportunity, not just to listen, but to be able to share ideas and talk with people and connect with coaches from different contexts, different part of their country and different parts of the world as well. And I thought that was really valuable. The main feedback was, Gareth, you rushed it. And that was dead true. I was outside of the breakout rooms, so I rushed it. So we're going to go at least 10 minutes on this, and I'm going to time it to make sure that I don't cut people off this time. And also the other feedback was have a bit of guidelines of what we're discussing in there. Now, to be honest, I don't mind what you discuss in there. Once you put your cameras on and microphones, nice to introduce yourself, say where you're from, what context you're coaching in. But I have put up some guiding questions there, which you can stick with or ignore as much as you like. But these sort of three things and anything else that Warren and Drew mentioned, I suppose we could look at, what does football need to do to keep players playing the game? You've heard some ideas and thoughts already. And maybe does your club have a retention plan? Does your club think about how it's going to keep players playing the game? What part do you, the coaches, play in this? What you've considered doing and how maybe you've changed over the years to incorporate that, and maybe how you've seen your role change. And maybe particularly telling now, what impact might this break in football have on participation? Are we sure that everyone that was playing before is going to come back? Is it actually an opportunity to get a new set of participants? That Robin outlined his 4 R's, and I think that will be useful to discuss as well. But essentially, as long as we're discussing retention in football, then I'm happy wherever the conversations go. Well, thank you, everybody. I dropped into a couple of rooms, and there seems to be there was discussion flowing in the rooms that I went in. So I hope that was the case in your rooms. I just thought it might be quite nice. Robin's had to go. Like I said, he's got a meeting with UEFA now, so he's had to move on. But still with us, Jack? Are you? Is Jack with us still?
He's on mute.
Ah, there we go. Okay. All right. As long as he's still there. Chris, you're still with us?
How's that, Gareth? Am I unmuted now?
You're back,
Perfect.
mate.
Well done,
Yeah,
Jack.
I'm good. I've got my coffee now, so I'm all good to go.
Perfect. But what I thought might be quite nice is, Jack, are you all right to stay for a little bit longer for some more questions?
Yeah, I've got all day.
Don't say that. People will hold you that.
Loaded up on caffeine, so yeah, wind me up.
All right. Well, what I thought might be quite nice is just a couple of people to just give us maybe a 30-second overview of the conversation in their room. And I won't pounce on anybody here. I've primed a couple of people to do that. So amazingly, out of all the coaches we've got in the world, a good friend of mine, Aaron Kuzak, ended up in a room with someone who lives down the road from him, and no one else. So they could have had this conversation down a cafe. But
Over the fence.
We had a Plymouth conversation. But Aaron, is it possible you can put your camera and mic on and give us a bit of a 30-second feedback?
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. What was interesting, I couldn't get in the room earlier this morning, and I spoke to Daryl and said, send me the new link. So, and then, lo and behold, all the way from sunny Australia, I got dumped in the same room as him. Anyway, but we had a brief chat about kind of tracking retention and player engagement. And Daryl, who works for Plymouth Argyle, the Premier League Stars community program, looked at the measure of success and how they can track a child from when they first meet them, maybe in a football and community schools program, and how they go through. They might drop out and then come back into the system 2 or 3 years later. And it's just having that relationship already kind of embedded and understanding the fact that really promotes value in the individual. So if you haven't seen someone for a couple of years, and then you're familiar with their foundations and who they are, going to them and saying, I remember you from a couple of years ago, really makes them feel quite inspired and quite awed the fact that you remembered them. So building those relationships were key. And then we went on to just quickly discuss about, we feel that a lot of children are predominantly products of the environment that they're exposed to. So if a coach is very kind of results driven, ego led, that kind of resonates sometimes in the behavior of the children. So it's trying to find that trade-off between winning and competing and not necessarily losing sight of why they're involved in the first place.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate you doing that. Thank you very much. And you and Daryl can carry on the conversation.
Absolutely.
At the end of it. Richard Lacey, are you out there somewhere? If you are, Rich, if you can turn your mic off and put your camera on and talk to us.
Hello, Gareth.
How you doing, Rich? You all right, mate?
Very good. Yeah, the first part of the chat was we were interested in why you were so keen on walking football. We decided it's because you've been playing that for so long already. And but then Drew sort of led a conversation in particular around the cost of football in Australia and how potentially that might not actually be such a barrier, even if you're playing at NPL level, when you compare it to the competing sports. I'm a father of 3 daughters, and I know how expensive dance is, for example. So we had an interesting chat over sort of, cost and if that's a barrier or people dropping out around that. And the other one, we had a brief chat around what might be the effect post this lockdown. We discussed maybe it's going to motivate people to stay in the game. And I'm particularly interested in, I think the sort of platforms people have been using, things like WhatsApp groups, Teams, Zoom, all of these things. Can we use that to engage our players to stay in the game? For example, I used the example of my son, the club he's playing at. Every day they're setting challenges, they're keeping in contact, they're kind of building a very strong team culture.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rich. I appreciate that. Apart from the first comment, excellent. I saw Barry Wood raised his hand. Barry, would you like to, I don't know whether you're asking a question or giving feedback, but we'd welcome your comments.
I wasn't. I actually pressed the wrong button, but I could let you know it certainly wasn't me that was shouting earlier, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you, Barry. No problem at all. I might call on one more person that I haven't primed, so apologies. I don't know if Nathan's out there. Nathan, you asked a question about PE and schools and the link to participation. I wondered if you wanted to offer any feedback on that, whether your room got to that conversation.
Yeah, sorry, Gareth. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you, Nathan. You go on.
Yeah, so I was in the room with Jack, and had to shoot off real quickly. But the question before was just, I think the communication between PE teachers and clubs in grassroots is crucial. I think sometimes there could be opportunities for mixed messages. Clubs have different values to maybe what educators have, and just wanted to know what the guys' feedback might be on how that could affect the retention of players in the game.
Okay, well, thanks, Nathan, and sorry to I said I wouldn't pounce on anybody, and then I did, so apologies for that. But
no, it's all right, no problem.
So maybe we'll start with that. I know Warren and Drew are monitoring the chat room, and we'll go to some questions from that. But Jack or Chris, do you want to take up Nathan's point about the links between PE, school sport, education, and participation? Any thoughts on that?
Happy to let Chris lead the batting with this one.
I'll go. For me, I think there's two sides to it, and the experiences I had as a development officer with the Sporting Schools program, which is a program here in Australia where we do go into schools, and it's a 2 or 3 week block, and working with the PE teachers, and the kids have a great experience tasting our sport or any sports in that program. And then there was the aim to connect them to some local grassroots clubs, and then they turn up, they've had a fantastic experience with the qualified teacher or with the qualified coach who's working with the teacher, and then they're coached by Jim the van driver, and then they don't have that same experience. So I think we yes, that is something that we need to do a lot more of, and engage the quality sport time that the kids get at school, and work a lot closer with schools and grassroots clubs. But ultimately, again, for me, it goes down to what's their experience like when they're going down to the grassroots club, because you might find that they've had a fantastic experience at school, but then they go down and they might have a very poor coach who gets the kids to run laps, they're not playing games, they're not doing anything they want to do, and then they drop out of the game because the experience isn't the same as when they're in that more professional environment when it comes to school. So for me, it comes down to, again, what's their experience like away from that school sport program at the grassroots club.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Warren, what's the question that has appealed to you most in the chat room that you can throw across to Jack?
I've just picked up one here now, just looking at down the side there, and I think it resonates with everything that we've been talking about so far, and connecting the dots. But it's from Sean Darcy in WA. How you doing, Sean? And he's just put in the chat here: could grassroots courses include more how you coach, and could there be more online content? And the contact might be more about what the coach, vice versa. So it just basically, you've got the face-to-face stuff that we do in the grassroots courses, but could there potentially be more of an online approach? And certainly post-COVID-19, that might be something that's quite relevant right now.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Hello, Sean, and nice to virtually meet you. I've lost count of how many times I've read your blog now, so there's a recommendation for everyone on here. Sean writes a really interesting blog. I don't know if you're still keeping up with it, Sean, but I've seen some really great posts from you on there. I guess that was split into a couple of parts. So how you coach, let's try and tackle that one first. One of my idols was a guy called Rod Thorpe, and he and Dave Bunker from Loughborough University back in the day, I think they were the pioneers of what we now know to be teaching games for understanding. There's a cracking video, I'm sure you could pull it off Twitter or YouTube somewhere, of Rod taking some Japanese coaches, or I think a coach education seminar in Japan. And he opens the seminar with 2 sentences. There is no right way to coach. There is no right way to coach. Just to make the point. And I fully agree with him there that there's a lot of talk around how to coach, and we kind of go around in cycles, and things become fashionable and then things become unfashionable. So I think right now that instruction or instructional coaching, or what people refer to as command style, I would disagree that I think the two are different in some way. But that's now kind of got a bit of a bad name. And so people have kind of steering away from using instructional coaching behaviors for fear of, I guess, being seen to be wrong, whatever that may be. So I think what we need to do is educate or make coaches more aware of different coaching behaviors. And I would lean towards Chris Cushion's work on this for anyone that's interested. They have the coach case system, I think it's called, which is worth a look at. But basically that's breaking down what actually comes out of a coach's mouth and coding it and looking at, what do you actually do compared to what you think you do or what you say that you do. That's what I'm interested in. So the more that we can make coaches self-aware about their own coaching behaviors, I think the more empowered that they should be able to feel to be able to select the right behavior for the right person at the right time. And that's difficult to do, and it's difficult to change, certainly in the short term. But I think just the awareness of it in the first place would be a helpful starter. So we're looking, so coaching behaviors. I think, was there a second part to that question there, Warren?
I think it was about online.
Yeah, online. Yeah, so we're living in the content age, aren't we? And the everything, or a lot of things are at our fingertips in the touch of a button. This is a medium. You're going to record this, so this content, I guess, won't necessarily be lost to those who weren't, beyond the 100 who have accessed it today. That will be available for future generations and so on. So we're living in an age where, content is accessible to anyone and any time. I think the way that I've been listening to some really interesting stuff coming out of New York, and some professors on some podcasts recently talking about the way that they think that higher education is going to go, and it is already going because of the disruption that we're facing at the moment. Coach education, there's a huge element of in context. You've talked about the word context a few times this morning, Gareth, and I think that is context is key. What we're trying to do at the FA is move or blend our education with context. So running courses in clubs. So the last coach education course I delivered before the lockdown was it was literally a few hundred yards from my house, over the hill, a local club on their site, at their facilities, on their training nights. We did it over 7 evenings, and I think for 6 of those evenings, the practical content was the coaches coaching their own players at their normal training session time, who were able to then be observed and given some feedback on their own coaching. So that was quite nice. And I think the more that we can move that in terms of education, the better. And it does require some thought and time and energy and doing things differently, and it is messy, and it isn't as tidy as just a load of adults coming together for one congregation. We stay together for a weekend, we all behave in each other's sessions and then go home. But from what I've seen, the benefits are worth it in the long run. So if we can start to shift education to be more context based, then for me that's largely a good thing. I don't know if that answers the question.
It does, Jack, and I know you've done some work on helping coaches how they can analyse their behaviours, and it is really powerful. Otherwise, we're left with saying what we think we do, and sometimes what we want to do is very different to what our behaviours actually are. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. Drew, question from you, buddy.
Yeah, I think maybe around Jack, Chris, what influence do you think maybe that idea of people of the game progressing somewhere, so grassroots being, and then you need to try and progress through the game to get to a higher level, which some may or may not be able to do. So that traditional concept of a pathway, and does that have an impact upon retention in those grassroots levels if that becomes something that they can't get up there? And then depending on what their thoughts are, I possibly have some, but we'll see how it goes. So there we are.
You can come back and give thoughts, Drew. That's perfectly within the rules.
Cheers, Drew. I'll lead. For me, I think it comes down to clubs need to understand their own club philosophy, and that for me isn't just the playing philosophy. It's what sort of club do they want to be? Are they just a true grassroots club where it's just the kids come and play, they then have a fantastic experience, or do they see themselves as maybe a feeder club into someone else's club, or are they a development club? So because then that will then nut down into the decisions of parents that go there primarily, but then also around the selection of coaches as well, which is so important. We had a conversation with Sean and Neil Mann in the breakout rooms around the selection of coaches is true to grassroots clubs. So isn't say the experience of the whole club. It might just be one coach inside that club because of poor selection. So for me, it goes down to what does the club see itself at? What are their beliefs? Why do they exist? And then that will then underpin everything they do. But for me, it's just as well, goes hand in hand with around clubs not being scared to pass their players on to maybe the next level as well. We see that a lot here in Australia, and Drew, you'll see it as well. And same for Warren, and I'm sure it's happening around the world, is that clubs want to keep their player. They don't want them to go and trial at Sydney FC, or they don't want them to go and experience that 4-week invitation to go and train with an A-League club because they're scared of losing them, because they want to win the Tin Pot Trophy at the end of the season for their own ego. So I think we just need to put the player first in what they're doing, but clubs also need to understand, well, what sort of club are we?
Okay, lovely. Go on, Drew. It's your moment.
No.
Warming up for next week.
Yeah, look, like most things, I don't have answers, but I've always got questions and that. So, I think the bit that resonates with me is that bit about like, should clubs, parents, players, everything look at it not as a pathway or a ladder where you're going to get somewhere where there's one way to go and you're probably going to get stuck behind others, and just start to reimagine, especially at grassroots, but all football more as that kind of jungle gym thing where, yes, you can get to the top, but you can also go round. There's many ways to get there, and regardless of whether you make it to the top or not, you can have an unbelievable experience on it. Whereas if we look at it as a ladder, we talk about it as a ladder and it gets framed up as a ladder, you basically get to the top, or you get stuck halfway up and you're on the way back down. And I think it's an interesting analogy, one that I'm still unpacking in my head, but interested in people's thoughts in the chat room, or even just to spark conversation about whether, if we start to look at all that stuff differently, does that help in terms of the rhetoric that's around, and maybe take some of the pressure off players to think that there's some kind of perceived idea of where they may need to get to, even from a grassroots level?
Brilliant. Thank you, Drew. Thanks a lot. And I can tell you're getting ready for next week when you're on the panel. So, no, brilliant. Warren, is there maybe, look, so I'm very conscious of everybody's time, and particularly Jack's time. I could do this all night, but I think we have to have a cut-off point. What was that, Jack?
I said, don't worry about me. It's only 9:20 in the morning here. We've got all day here.
My dinner's in the oven. I could be in trouble. So, Warren, is there one final question for Jack before we sort of look at the people that want to stay and continue chatting about this topic?
Yeah, there was a discussion that we were having in the breakout room around depending on the stage of development you're in, basically what does football look like. So an example being here, and noting that the FA are probably about 10 years ahead, 11v11 in under 9s, 10s, 11s and 12s, and the relationship between the size, the 11v11 format, and the engagement of players. So you just the thought process, I guess, having now obviously with yourself at the FA, and then it's been going on throughout this whole chat and the chain as well, as what's the link there, and what was the process that they went through in the FA to engage players, or get the correct format for players at those age groups?
Yeah, so I've got to give credit to my friend and former colleague Nick Levitt. He led the youth development review, which was started in, I think it was when the World Cup was on in South Africa, actually. So it would have been 2010, around the summer. So it took him 2 years to start the process of consultation and then propose changes and then get voted through the FA Council. But we used to, the old system was mini soccer was from U7 to U10, which was 7v7 on a 60x40. And then overnight, the players would switch to an 11v11 game at U11. So the idea was, well, I guess, more than threefold really. So change the size of the teams, the size of the pitches, and gradually increase the competition formats as the players go up. So they enter the game at U7 5v5 on a 30x40. They stay in that for 2 years, and then at U9 they go to 7v7 60x40. At U11 they then go to 9v9. That's for 2 years minimum, and then and that's on a let me think 70x50. We're talking yards here. We're not on the metric system when it comes to football size pitches. And then at U13 11v11. Now, there's a few caveats there in terms of the size of the pitches and the size of the teams. These are maximums. So leagues can still operate with smaller numbers should they wish, if that suits their local area. But sometimes these things get lost in the weeds. So we've tried to take advantage of this locally, where we've looked over the last couple of seasons at where are the pinch points, and one of those pinch points is U13. So things move okay, and in my own experience with the boys I coach anyway, we were fine. I was with them U10, U11, U12, and then U13. That's when the cricket stores started to happen, because that's where the physical differences are exposed to the maximum. You've got players who are not physically mature enough playing on a full-size pitch in full-size goals. So one of the things we did locally was say, right, some of these boys actually really like playing 11v11 because they feel it's the real game. They go to Anfield or Goodison on a Saturday afternoon, and they want to emulate that. So what we did was just use small, play 11v11 under 13 and under 14, but just use a 3/4 pitch with 9v9 goals. So just adapt the pitch. And what we've seen last season in the U13s was, I went to watch a few of the games, and it looked like proper football. Whereas sometimes you go to a U13 game on a full-size pitch, and it doesn't look like the game of football. One team will often struggle to get out of their own half. So that's the pitch sizes and formats. And then interestingly, the competition structure, this isn't one that gets talked about very often, but it was gradually what we were finding was the old way. Leagues would run a league starting in September, and that league would run like a traditional adult season through to May. And so, kids like to be involved in things that they feel that they've got a chance of winning. Because I think winning has become a bit of a dirty word in our profession. But I think if you treat it well, it can be, competition and winning can be really healthy if done in the right way. So we moved to a model where competition or trophy events will be gradually phased in. So at U7 and U8, 3 phases in the season. So in other words, three trophy events that could last 2 weeks. So for example, you might run a 2-week festival in October, another one in February, and another one in May. But the rest of the games would be, and I don't like the term friendlies, but I'll use that, just so we know what we're talking about here. So that was U7, U8, U9, U10. That would go up to 3 times 4 weeks. U11 would be 3 times 6 weeks, and then by the time they go into high school over here, which is U12, then if the league wishes, then they can revert to that traditional model. However, many leagues now around the country are starting to look at this and go, well, how can we, within the parameters, play with the format to make the experience more enjoyable? So how can we, put on more creative formats of competition? Because that's, one of the things that the evidence suggests, that that kids do like exciting, creative competition. They can play a whole season on FIFA overnight, but they have to wait until 7 days until the next game. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for us adults who are involved in clubs and leagues, if we connect more and listen more, to put football on terms that are more in line with what the players want from the game.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah, great point, great overview, and love your idea about creative formats of competition. And I think it's definitely something that coaches have to stay abreast of to keep up with the kids. I'm gonna stop it there. It's gonna be my decision to call it a day there, but I'm gonna do some admin before we thank Jack and before we let him go. But you do win. In case I do forget, Jack, you definitely win best background.
It's my man cave, Gareth. It used to be a garage, but I've turned it into a bar now.
I like to think you've played and worn all those. Look at that. That is impressive. Okay, let me share the screen again. And
Gareth, while you're doing this, I've noticed in the chat that there's a few questions direct to me that I haven't got onto. Is there a way that I can stay online, or maybe speak to those people individually?
Two ways we can do this, Jack. The chat saves. So something we tried last week, we didn't get a lot of uptake on, is actually posting some of the unanswered questions to generate discussion then. But we are also going to have a little extra time, so we'll have 10 minutes at the end of this where people can go back into breakout rooms and carry on those conversations. So what I might do is, if you're happy to stay in there, I might put you in one, but then maybe move you around. So probably you'll be halfway through a sentence and then be put into another group.
Yeah, no problem. There's just a few that I've noticed that I've not addressed yet that I'd like to.
Thank you, Jack. Really appreciate that. A couple of things. By registering today, Robin very kindly put together a document specifically for the Monday Night Coaches Club. We didn't really want to go through slides tonight, but there's so much valuable information on there that I will send that out to people that are registered today. If you don't already subscribe to Robin's Sports Path newsletter, it's a great newsletter about e-learning and online learning in sport, and particularly football. So in relation to the earlier question, this is the way to see what people are doing. And it looks like Robin is starting a new course, Disruptive Innovation in Football Development, to maximise participation. So seems fascinating there. So definitely sign up to that newsletter. I really recommend it. Now, I like to call these two rival podcasts. Jack is involved with the Liverpool FA podcast, an excellent podcast that interviews people in the football development and the football coaching world. Is that a fair summary, Jack? I've listened to a fair few episodes. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I don't put out stuff as often as I probably should, but I try to only put stuff out when I think there's something relevant to say, or I prefer to do them in person, so we get people round to the bar here and have a chat over a coffee or what have you. But I've got some audio that is going to come out over the next few days and this week, I think. So I've got a bit of a backlog to get through, but yeah, try to.
And I know you were thinking of using the audio from this. You might have to do some editing with the Zoom bombing.
Don't worry about that. We're a hardy bunch up here.
Good. And our second podcast is the podcast from our very own Chris, Drew and Warren in the technical area. Who's on next? Drew, who's on next, or who have you had recently?
Oh, yeah, so good couple of ones coming up this week. We're the exact opposite of Jack. We just keep putting stuff out all the time. So there you go. But we'll have one out on Wednesday and then another one on Friday. We've got a very much English Premier League slant to the next couple coming up with some current and former players on there. So, and talking about actually their pathway from grassroots football to the Premier League. So maybe of interest to people as well.
Brilliant. And we're going to be here again next week. And again, hopefully we'll not the guests. The guests are excellent, but hopefully we'll get a little bit better at understanding the format. So please keep that feedback coming. We've got a really interesting one again next week, coaching players' individual needs, and we've got some fascinating people on the panel. We've got Alex Otto, who is a one-on-one coaching specialist from Germany. Part of his role is overseeing the performance analyst. I can't say that word. The performance analysts for the German national team, but he's worked one-on-one with German players from the national team, from the Bundesliga, from Champions League, etc. So he's a fascinating character. We've got Jack's colleague and my ex-colleague, Gavin Stepp, who is the head coach of the National Performance Camp for, I think, under 14 girls, and is the Women's Foundation phase lead at the FA. And Gavin's particularly interested in exploring how we can assess and identify potential rather than people's current level and competence. So that's fascinating there. And then we have our own Drew Taylor, and Drew's done a lot of work in the player identification development space, and Drew's particularly interested in how we can cater for individuals within this team sport environment. So a fascinating one that I'm really looking forward to next week. Details of how to register should be coming out next week, and apologies from me if I confused your ease of registration by giving a link that may appear to have been a wrong link. So like I say, we'll improve as we go, so apologies for that. In a minute, I'm going to see if anybody wants to stay on and continue chatting. I'll probably go grab a cup of tea and let people chat. But before I do that, I wanted to thank Robin. Although he's not here, I've already had a message from him saying he thoroughly enjoyed it, enjoyed the format, enjoyed the breakout rooms, and enjoyed talking all things grassroots football. So we're really appreciative of Robin fitting us in before he had the meeting with UEFA. An absolute pleasure for me to see Jack again. Last time I saw him, it was in Sydney. So hopefully he'll be over again soon, and if he does, we'll definitely make sure that we get to pick his brains in a forum where all coaches can benefit, rather than just having a beer with me. You promised me a beer, Gareth. Sure. Well, I still owe it you, mate. I still owe it you. So no, Jack, I said at the beginning that you were one of the most innovative and creative coach educators that I've ever come across, and I think that shone through tonight. So I really appreciate your time, Jack. And if you're happy to stay around, I know coaches will really appreciate that. More than happy. Lovely.